Taehyun wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked the control panel one more time. The environmental system on Nexus Prime was working perfectly now. He smiled to himself. It had taken 3 hours to fix, but he had done it. The temperature in this section of the space station would stay comfortable for the important meeting. He was an engineer, not a diplomat. While Captain Jiwoo and the others prepared for the big day, Taehyun preferred to stay with his machines and systems. They made sense to him. They did what they were supposed to do. People were harder to understand sometimes, but today was special. Today the Vrakkith were coming. Taehyun had seen pictures of them. Everyone in the galaxy had. The Vrakkith looked like nightmares. They were huge predators with 4 legs, sharp teeth, and spines that could cut through metal. Their eyes glowed in the dark. Most species in the galaxy were terrified of them. For 200 years, the Vrakkith had stayed away from everyone else. They lived on their own worlds and kept to themselves. Other species were happy about that. They told scary stories about the Vrakkith to their children, but now the Vrakkith wanted to talk. They wanted to join the galactic community, and somehow, the humans had been chosen to help make that happen. Taehyun gathered his tools and started walking back to the main area. The corridors of the space station were quieter than usual. Most of the aliens who worked here had moved to the far side of the station. They did not want to be anywhere near the Vrakkith. He understood their fear. Fear was natural. Back on his grandmother's farm on Earth, he had learned that all creatures felt fear. The chickens were afraid of the dogs. The dogs were afraid of the bulls. Even the bulls were afraid of storms. Fear kept you alive. But his grandmother had also taught him something else. She said that fear should not stop you from being curious. Fear should not stop you from being kind. Taehyun was thinking about his grandmother when the lights changed. The corridor went darker and the temperature dropped. His breath made small clouds in the air. The Vrakkith had arrived early. He heard them before he saw them. Their footsteps were heavy, like distant thunder. The sound echoed through the metal halls. Then he heard something else. A different sound. Lighter, faster, curious. Taehyun turned a corner and stopped. A young Vrakkith stood in the middle of the corridor. It was small, maybe the size of a large dog. But even small, it was impressive. Dark scales covered its body, with patterns that glowed softly blue and green. Small spines ran down its back, not yet fully grown. Its eyes were the most striking thing. They shined bright blue-green, and they were looking right at him with clear intelligence. The young Vrakkith tilted its head, studying him. Taehyun stood very still. His heart was beating faster, but he was not panicking. He had been around animals his whole childhood. He knew how to read their body language. This young one was not hunting. It was not angry. It was curious. The cub took a step closer. Then another. Its nose moved, smelling the air. Taehyun could hear a soft rumbling sound coming from its chest. Not a growl. Something else. Something almost like a cat's purr, but deeper. Taehyun slowly knelt down. He made himself smaller, less threatening. The cub's ears perked up at this movement. It came closer still until it was just an arm's length away. The young Vrakkith reached out with one paw and touched his toolbox. Its claws clicked against the metal. Then it looked at Taehyun's hand, which was resting on his knee. The cub moved forward quickly and nipped his hand. Taehyun felt the sharp teeth press against his skin. It did not break through, but it could have. Easily. The cub was testing him, playing with him the way young animals do, seeing what he would do. Every instinct in the galaxy said he should pull away, show fear, prove he was prey. Taehyun did not pull away. Instead, he looked at the small marks on his hand with interest. Then he looked at the cub and smiled slightly. He spoke softly in Korean, then switched to English so his translator could work. "You are very strong," he said quietly, "but you are also gentle. You did not want to hurt me. You wanted to know what I would do." The cub went completely still. Its glowing eyes changed color, shifting from blue-green to something warmer, almost amber. Slowly, carefully, Taehyun extended his hand, palm down. The cub sniffed it, taking in his scent. Then it did something that made Taehyun's breath catch. The young Vrakkith lowered its head and pressed its forehead against his palm. Taehyun felt the cool scales under his hand. He felt the trust in that gesture. He did not know much about Vrakkith culture, but he understood this moment. This was something important. The corridor suddenly filled with sound. Heavy footsteps came running. Multiple creatures, large and fast. Taehyun looked up and saw 3 adult Vrakkith racing toward them. These were fully grown. Each one was massive, easily twice the height of a human. Their spines were extended, their teeth bared. The lead Vrakkith was the largest. Battle scars crossed his dark scales. His eyes burned with the orange-red color of anger and fear. This had to be the cub's father. Taehyun heard more footsteps from the other direction. Human footsteps. His crewmates were coming. He heard Lieutenant Subin shouting his name, but Taehyun did not move quickly. Fast movements would frighten the cub. Instead, he slowly withdrew his hand and stood up, backing away to give the young one space to return to its family. The cub looked back at him. Its eyes had changed color again. Now they were gold. Pure gold shining like small suns. The young Vrakkith walked back to the large adult, who immediately moved to place himself between his child and Taehyun. But the adult's eyes were not on the human. They were on his child, staring at those golden eyes with what looked like shock. More Vrakkith arrived, including an elderly female whose scales were silver with age. She had to be the high matriarch that Captain Jiwoo had talked about. She looked at the cub, then at Taehyun, then back at the cub's golden eyes. Captain Jiwoo, Lieutenant Subin, and Dr. Hana ran up from the other side. They stopped when they saw the scene. Everyone stood frozen, humans on one side, Vrakkith on the other, and between them a small space where something impossible had just happened. The High Matriarch spoke, her voice deep and rumbling. The translator in Taehyun's ear turned her words into English. "What did you do to my grandchild?" Taehyun looked at the ancient Vrakkith leader. He spoke simply and honestly. "Nothing," he said. "Your grandchild tested me. I passed the test. We met as equals." The High Matriarch stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at her grandchild again, at those impossible golden eyes. "No one has ever seen that color before," she said softly. "Not in all our history." The young Vrakkith made a small sound, a happy chirp. It tried to move toward Taehyun again, but its father held it back gently with one large paw. The father looked at Taehyun with an expression that was hard to read. Was it suspicion, wonder, fear? "What is your name, human?" the father asked. "Han Taehyun," he answered. "I am war leader Thrak. This is my child, Kresh." The father paused, his eyes never leaving Taehyun's face. "My child has never bowed to anyone outside our pack. Never. What are you?" Taehyun thought about how to answer that. What was he? An engineer? A farmer's grandson? A human who had grown up with animals and learned to speak their language of patience and respect. "I am someone who sees your child as a person, not a monster," he said finally. "Just a young person who wanted to play." The High Matriarch made a sound deep in her chest. She turned to Captain Jiwoo. "We will talk now," she said, "and this engineer will join us. The universe has shown us a sign today. We must understand what it means." As the groups began to move toward the conference rooms, Taehyun looked back one more time. Kresh was looking at him too, golden eyes shining with joy and curiosity. The young Vrakkith gave a small wave with one paw. Taehyun waved back. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple exchange would change the galaxy forever. The conference room was full of tension. Taehyun sat between Captain Jiwoo and Dr. Hana, feeling out of place. Across the table, the Vrakkith delegation sat perfectly still. Their eyes glowed in the dim light that they preferred. Little Kresh sat between the High Matriarch and war leader Thrak, those golden eyes fixed on Taehyun. Ambassador Quellen from the Galactic Council was also there. The bird-like alien could barely sit still. Every few seconds, Quellen's feathers ruffled with fear. The ambassador kept as far from the Vrakkith as possible. This was supposed to be a simple first meeting, Captain Jiwoo had explained earlier. Just introductions and basic discussions. But after what happened in the corridor, everything had changed. The High Matriarch spoke first. Her voice was ancient and powerful. "We came here today believing this meeting would fail," she said through the translator. "We believed no species could look at us without fear. We believed we were destined to be alone forever." She paused, her silver scales catching the light. "Then my grandchild met this human, and something impossible happened." War leader Thrak leaned forward. His voice was rough with emotion. The golden eyes mean trust beyond family. "In all our legends, in all our history, no Vrakkith has ever shown this color to an outsider. It is the color that pups show to their parents. The color of absolute faith." Dr. Hana was frantically taking notes. Captain Jiwoo looked shocked. Ambassador Quellen made a small, frightened sound. Taehyun felt everyone looking at him. He was just an engineer. He fixed machines. He was not supposed to be making history. I did not know, he said honestly. I just treated Kresh the way I would treat any curious young creature. With respect and patience. That is precisely what makes it remarkable, the High Matriarch said. You did not know our customs. You did not know what the bow meant. You simply responded with kindness. She looked at Captain Jiwoo. Tell us about your species. Tell us why you are different from the others who fear us. Captain Jiwoo took a breath and began to speak. Humans are both predator and prey, he explained. In our evolution, we learned to hunt, but we also learned to cooperate. We formed bonds with other species. We took wolves and made them into dogs, our companions. We took wild horses and made them into partners. We learned that strength and gentleness can exist together. Dr. Hana pulled up images on her tablet and showed them to the Vrakith. Pictures of children playing with dogs, farmers working with horses, rangers protecting wild animals. We call it domestication, she explained, but it is really partnership. We choose to live alongside creatures who could harm us. We trust them and they trust us. The Vrakith stared at the images. Thrak looked confused. But these creatures could kill your children, he said, pointing at a picture of a large dog. Why would you allow this? Because they choose not to, Taehyun said quietly. Just like Kresh chose not to hurt me. Your child could have bitten through my hand. But Kresh only wanted to test, to play, to learn. I saw that choice. I respected it. Kresh made a happy chirping sound and bounced slightly. Thrak put a gentle paw on his child to calm the excitement, but his expression had softened. The High Matriarch was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would echo through history. Engineer Taehyun, she said formally. Would you be willing to spend time with Kresh over the next few days? Under supervision, of course. We wish to understand this bond better. We wish to see if this was a single moment of chance, or if it is something that can grow. Taehyun looked at Kresh. The young Vrakith was staring at him with those golden eyes, full of hope. I would be honored, Taehyun said. Over the next 3 days, Taehyun and Kresh spent hours together. At first, Thrak and several other adult Vrakith watched every movement. Lieutenant Subin stood nearby with her hand always ready on her weapon. Dr. Hana recorded everything with her cameras and sensors. But slowly, the tension eased. Taehyun taught Kresh human games. He showed the young Vrakith how to solve puzzles. Kresh was incredibly smart. The cub learned quickly, those golden eyes brightening with each new discovery. In return, Kresh taught Taehyun about Vrakith communication. The spines on Kresh's back moved to show emotions. Flat meant calm. Slightly raised meant excited. Fully extended meant scared or angry. The colors of Kresh's eyes changed too. Blue for curiosity, green for contentment, gold for trust, and red for warning. Taehyun learned that the rumbling sound Kresh made was indeed like purring. It meant happiness. On the second day, something beautiful happened. Kresh tried to teach Taehyun a Vrakith song. It was a simple melody that young cubs learned from their parents. Thrak sat nearby watching his child sing the ancient notes. Taehyun tried to copy it. His human vocal cords could not make all the sounds, especially the deep subsonic notes that Vrakith used. But he tried. He hummed as best he could, and Kresh chirped with delight at his efforts. When Taehyun looked up, he saw that Thrak had tears in his eyes. Big predators were not supposed to cry, Taehyun thought, but Thrak was crying. That evening, Thrak asked to speak with Taehyun privately. They met in a small room with just Lieutenant Subin standing quietly in the corner for safety. Thrak sat down heavily. For a moment, the great warrior looked tired and old. I need to understand, Thrak said. Why do you do this? What do humans want from us? Taehyun shook his head. I am not doing this for humanity, he said. I am doing this because when I look at Kresh, I see a child. A curious, intelligent, kind child who deserves to grow up in a galaxy that sees that too. Not a monster. Not a weapon. Just a person. Thrak stared at him for a long time. Then he did something unexpected. He began to sing. It was the same song Kresh had been teaching Taehyun, but when Thrak sang it, the full depth of the melody came through. The subsonic notes made the floor vibrate. The harmonics were complex and beautiful. This is our teaching song, Thrak explained when he finished. Every parent sings it to their children. Every child carries it in their heart forever. I am singing it to you now because you have become part of my child's life. You are teaching Kresh things I cannot teach. How to trust someone different. How to build bridges instead of walls. Taehyun felt the weight of that gift. He stood and bowed deeply, the way he had learned to do from his Korean grandmother. Thank you, he said. I will honor this trust. On the third day, Ambassador Quellen finally gathered enough courage to watch one of the sessions. The bird-like alien stood in the doorway, shaking with fear but determined. Kresh noticed the ambassador immediately. The young Vrakith tilted its head, curious about this new creature. Taehyun gently guided Kresh. Stay calm, he said softly. Ambassador Quellen is scared. We need to show respect for that fear. Kresh understood. The young Vrakith lay down, making itself smaller. Its spines flattened completely. Its eyes shifted to a soft green. And Kresh began to purr quietly, a soothing sound. Ambassador Quellen watched in amazement. The terrifying predator was trying to be less frightening, trying to be kind. After 10 minutes, Quellen took one step into the room, then another. It took almost an hour, but eventually the ambassador sat down just a few meters away from Kresh. Nothing bad happened. They simply existed in the same space, prey and predator sharing a room, because both had chosen to try. That evening, the High Matriarch called for a formal gathering. All the delegations assembled. The room was full of aliens from a dozen species, all watching nervously. The High Matriarch stood tall and proud. We came here believing we would always be alone, she announced. But these humans have shown us another path. They have shown us that fear can be transformed into friendship, that our children can have friends beyond our own kind. She looked directly at Captain Jiwoo. The Vrakith wish to end our isolation. We wish to join the galactic community, but we ask that humanity serve as our guides and our bridge to the other species. Will you accept this role? Captain Jiwoo stood. He looked at his crew, at Taehyun and Dr. Hana and Lieutenant Subin. Then he looked at the Vrakith. We accept, he said. We will help build this bridge together. Kresh jumped up excitedly, bouncing and chirping. The young Vrakith ran to Taehyun and pressed against his legs, purring loudly. Those golden eyes shone brighter than ever. Around the room, aliens were murmuring to each other. Some were still scared, some were doubtful. But some, like Ambassador Quellen, were beginning to hope. Maybe the impossible was possible after all. Maybe fear could become friendship. Maybe one small human and one small Vrakith had started something that would change everything. 2 weeks had passed since the first meeting. The space station had transformed. More species were arriving every day, curious about the impossible friendship between human and Vrakith. Some came to support the new alliance. Others came to protest it. Taehyun spent every morning with Kresh now. The young Vrakith was growing quickly. Already Kresh was taller, the spines more developed. But the golden eyes remained constant, always bright when looking at Taehyun. Dr. Hana had discovered something fascinating in her research. She called it the empathy bond. When Taehyun was calm, Kresh was calm. When Taehyun was excited, Kresh became excited too. They were connected in a way that she had never seen between different species before. But not everyone was happy about these discoveries. One morning, protests erupted outside the conference areas. A group of aliens from various prey species had gathered. They held signs and chanted slogans. Predators cannot be trusted. Keep the monsters away. Protect our children. Kresh heard the chanting. The young Vrakith's spines rose slightly, and its eyes shifted from gold to a worried blue. Taehyun felt the change immediately through their bond. They are scared, Taehyun explained gently. They do not understand yet, but they will learn. Kresh made a sad sound. Am I a monster? The young Vrakith asked. His translator had improved over the weeks, making communication easier. No, Taehyun said firmly. You are a person. Just like them. Just like me. That afternoon, the High Matriarch asked for a special meeting. She wanted to share something with the humans. Something painful. She gathered Captain Jiwoo, Taehyun, Dr. Hana, and Lieutenant Subin in a private room. Thrak and several other elder Vrakith were also present. You must understand our history, the High Matriarch began. You must know why we isolated ourselves. She told them the story of first contact 200 years ago. The Vrakith had been excited to meet other intelligent species. They had approached with open hearts, wanting to share knowledge and culture, but the other species had seen only predators. Only monsters. They had attacked immediately, trying to drive the Vrakith away. Ships had fired on Vrakith vessels. Stations had refused them entry. Some species had even tried to declare war. The Vrakith had defended themselves. They were powerful warriors when they needed to be. But they had not wanted war. They had wanted friends, so they had retreated. They had gone back to their own worlds and closed their borders. For 200 years, they had raised their children to expect nothing from the galaxy except fear and rejection. The High Matriarch's voice broke as she finished the story. My own mother died in those early conflicts. She was a scientist, not a warrior. She wanted only to study the stars with others. But she was killed because she looked like a nightmare. The room was silent. Taehyun felt tears on his face. He had not known. He had not understood how much pain the Vrakith carried. Captain Jiwoo spoke softly. Humans understand something about being feared. When we first joined the galaxy, other species were nervous around us. They saw our history of wars. They saw that we were predators who hunted in packs. They worried we would be violent and aggressive. He paused, looking at each Vrakith in turn, but we proved them wrong through our actions, through patience and consistency, through showing them who we really were, not who they feared we might be. We can help you do the same. Thrak shook his head. You were feared, yes, but you still looked somewhat like the prey species. You walk on two legs. You use tools. You communicate in ways they understand. We are different. We look like the creatures that hunt them in their nightmares. That is precisely why this matters so much, Dr. Hana said. If the only species who can integrate are the ones who look familiar, then the galaxy stays small and fearful. But if humans and Vrakith can be friends, if prey species can learn to trust true predators, then everything changes. A few days later, something happened that tested everything they were building. Kresh and Taehyun were playing a game with a ball. Kresh would chase it and bring it back like the dogs Taehyun had known on Earth. But this time, Kresh got too excited. The young Vrakith jumped high, trying to catch the ball in midair, and crashed into a table. Kresh cried out in pain. A sharp piece of metal had cut the young Vrakith's leg. Blood, dark and thick, began to pool on the floor. Immediately, adult Vrakith rushed into the room. Thrak was first. His eyes went red with protective fury. His spines extended fully. He saw his child bleeding and looked for someone to blame. His first instinct was to blame Taehyun, but Kresh did something that stopped everyone. The young Vrakith limped to Taehyun and leaned against him, whimpering softly. Those golden eyes never left the human's face. Kresh wanted comfort from Taehyun, not blame. Dr. Hana rushed in with her medical kit. She knelt beside Kresh, speaking calmly as she examined the wound. It was not serious, but it needed to be treated. Taehyun held Kresh gently while Dr. Hana worked. He spoke soft words of encouragement. You are very brave, he said. This will heal quickly. You are strong. Kresh purred through the pain, trusting completely. Thrak watched all of this. His spine slowly lowered. His eyes shifted from red to orange to blue. He saw his child's absolute trust in the human. He saw that Taehyun was more concerned about Kresh than about his own safety. He saw real care, real friendship. That evening, Thrak came to find Taehyun again. The human was alone in a small garden area, looking out at the stars through the window. Thrak sat down beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Thrak broke the silence. When Kresh was born, I made a promise. I promised to keep my child safe from a galaxy that would hate us for what we are. I built walls around my heart. I taught Kresh to trust only our own kind. He looked at Taehyun with those intelligent, glowing eyes. But you have shown me something I had forgotten. Love is stronger than walls. Trust, when it is earned and given freely, creates bonds that fear cannot break. Thrak reached out one large paw. Taehyun, I was wrong to doubt you. You have become part of my family. Kresh calls you friend in the ancient way, the way we use only for packmates, and I call you the same. Taehyun took Thrak's paw in both his hands. The size difference was enormous. The Vrakith's claws could have torn him apart, but there was only gentleness in that touch. You honor me, Taehyun said, and I promise to keep honoring that trust. The next day, something remarkable happened. The High Matriarch made a formal announcement to the Galactic Council. The Vrakith would fully rejoin galactic society. But there was a condition. Humanity must serve as mediators and cultural bridges. They would help both sides understand each other. Ambassador Quellen stood up to speak. The bird-like alien was still nervous, but now there was determination in their voice. I have spent my whole life fearing predators. It is instinct written into my very genes. But I have watched Kresh and Taehyun together. I have seen impossible kindness. If they can build this bridge, then we must support them. Other delegates began to speak. Some were still afraid. Some were still doubtful. But slowly, one by one, species began to vote yes. The final vote was not unanimous. But it passed. The Vrakkith were no longer alone. That night there was a celebration. Vrakkith and humans gathered together. Music played, mixing melodies from both cultures. Food was shared. Stories were told. Kresh danced in circles, excited and happy. The young Vrakkith's leg was bandaged but healing well. Those golden eyes shone like small stars. Taehyun watched it all and felt overwhelmed. He was just one person. Just an engineer who had treated a curious young creature with kindness. How had that simple moment led to all of this? The High Matriarch approached him, moving slowly and gracefully despite her age. Do you know what you have done, Engineer Taehyun? She asked softly. You have given my people hope. For 200 years we believed we would always be monsters in the eyes of the galaxy. You showed us we could be seen as people. She touched his shoulder gently with one clawed hand. Your name will be in our songs forever. You will be remembered in our stories for as long as Vrakkith exist. Taehyun did not know what to say, so he simply bowed deeply and respectfully. Across the room, Kresh called out to him. The young Vrakkith wanted to show Taehyun a new dance move. Taehyun smiled and went to join his friend. The real work was just beginning. But tonight they would celebrate the impossible becoming possible. 6 months had changed everything. Nexus Prime was no longer just a meeting place. It had become a home for a new kind of community. Vrakkith families lived alongside humans now. Other species were slowly beginning to join them, though many still kept their distance. Taehyun had been promoted. He was now Director of Interspecies Relations, though he still thought of himself as just an engineer. His job was to help humans and Vrakkith understand each other better. Dr. Hana worked with him, studying how different species could communicate and bond. Lieutenant Subin trained with Vrakkith warriors, learning their fighting techniques while teaching them human strategies. But the biggest change was in Kresh. The young Vrakkith had grown so much. Kresh was now the size of a small horse with fully developed spines and powerful muscles. The cub's voice had deepened. But those golden eyes remained the same whenever Kresh looked at Taehyun. Kresh was also learning to be a bridge between worlds. The young Vrakkith attended classes with human children and helped translate Vrakkith concepts for the humans. Kresh was patient and kind, never using size or strength to intimidate others. One morning, Thrak came to Taehyun with an important question. In our culture, young Vrakkith must complete a coming-of-age ritual. It proves they are ready to join adult society. Kresh will need to do this soon. What does the ritual involve? Taehyun asked. Traditionally, a young Vrakkith must track and hunt dangerous prey. They must show courage, skill, and strength. Thrak paused, looking uncomfortable. But Kresh wants to do something different. My child wants to include human elements in the ritual. Kresh wants you to participate. Taehyun felt honored and nervous at the same time. What does Kresh have in mind? Thrak explained that Kresh wanted to prove not just hunting ability, but also problem-solving, cooperation, and empathy. These were human values that Kresh had learned. The young Vrakkith wanted to show that both cultures could make someone strong. The High Matriarch was not sure about this change. She called a meeting of all the elder Vrakkith. The debate was intense. Some argued that changing the ritual would dishonor their ancestors. Others said that adaptation was also a form of strength. Thrak spoke in favor of his child's wishes. Captain Jiwoo explained how human cultures also evolved their traditions over time. Finally, the High Matriarch made her decision. We will allow this. But the ritual must still prove that Kresh is capable and strong. It must still honor our values even while including new ones. The ritual took place a week later. A special arena had been prepared with various challenges. Other Vrakkith gathered to watch. Many humans came too, including all of Taehyun's friends and colleagues. The first challenge was traditional. Kresh had to track artificial prey through a complex maze using only scent and sound. The young Vrakkith completed it quickly and efficiently. showing the hunting skills that were natural to the species. The second challenge was new. Kresh and Taehyun had to work together to solve a series of puzzles. They had to communicate, plan, and trust each other. When one puzzle required strength beyond what Taehyun had, Kresh provided it. When another required fine manipulation that Kresh's claws could not manage, Taehyun handled it. They worked as a team, complementing each other's abilities. The third challenge was about empathy. Kresh had to interact with a very young prey species child who was terrified of Raketh. The challenge was to calm the child without using any force, only patience and kindness. Kresh approached slowly, keeping spines flat and eyes a soft green. The young Vrakith began to purr gently, that soothing sound that meant safety. Kresh offered toys and made funny movements that made the child giggle. After 20 minutes, the prey species child was actually petting Kresh's scales, fear completely gone. The crowd erupted in amazement. Even the skeptical elder Vrakith looked impressed. The final challenge combined everything. Kresh had to rescue a dummy from a dangerous situation that required strength, intelligence, cooperation with Taehyun, and care not to damage what was being rescued. They succeeded perfectly. When it was over, the High Matriarch stood before the crowd. Her voice was strong and proud. Kresh has proven strength in body, mind, and heart. My grandchild has shown that our old ways and new ways can create something better than either alone. Kresh is now recognized as a full adult of our people, and will be given a new title. She placed a ceremonial necklace around Kresh's neck. It was made of crystal that glowed with the same golden color as Kresh's eyes. From this day, you are Kresh of Two Worlds. Ambassador of new bonds, you carry our traditions forward while building our future. The celebration lasted all night. Vrakith and humans danced together, songs from both cultures mixed in the air. Food was shared, stories told, friendships deepened, but the work was far from over. News of the successful integration was spreading across the galaxy. Other isolated predator species were watching. Some were beginning to hope they too might find acceptance. 3 months after Kresh's coming-of-age ceremony, a new delegation arrived at Nexus Prime. They were called the Nethrik, an even more fearsome predator species than the Vrakith. They looked like giant insects with sharp mandibles and multiple legs. Their compound eyes reflected light in disturbing ways. The station immediately went into panic. Security increased. Most non-predator species fled to the far sections. Even some humans were nervous, but Kresh volunteered to make first contact. I learned from Taehyun, Kresh explained. I learned how to approach with patience and respect. Let me try with the Nethrik. Thrak was worried. So was Taehyun. But they also trusted Kresh. Kresh approached the Nethrik delegation alone, walking slowly with spines flat and eyes a friendly green. The young Vrakith ambassador did exactly what Taehyun had done months before. Showed no fear but also no aggression, offered respect and curiosity. The lead Nethrik, a creature named Skitter, watched carefully. Then Skitter made a gesture with multiple limbs that meant greeting in their culture. Kresh copied the gesture as best as possible with different anatomy. The Nethrik delegation relaxed slightly. First contact had been made successfully. Over the following weeks, Kresh worked with the Nethrik while Taehyun advised. The young Vrakith ambassador used all the lessons learned: patience, respect, understanding that fear was natural but could be overcome, showing that predators could choose kindness. The Nethrik slowly opened up. They shared their own history of isolation and loneliness. They too wanted to be part of the larger galaxy. One evening, Taehyun and Kresh sat together looking at the stars through a window. I am so proud of you, Taehyun said. You are doing what I did, but better. You understand both sides. Kresh's golden eyes glowed softly in the darkness. I learned from the best teacher. You showed me that the strongest thing we can do is choose to be gentle. That real courage is not about fighting, but about reaching out. The galaxy is changing, Kresh continued, because you chose to see me as a person, because you did not pull away when I tested you. Everything that is happening now started with that one moment of kindness. Taehyun smiled. No, he said. It started with you choosing to trust. I just recognized what you were offering. They sat in comfortable silence, watching ships arrive and depart from the station. Each ship carried species that were learning to live together. Learning to look past fear. Learning that family could be chosen, not just inherited. The Galactic Council officially recognized the changes with a new treaty. It was called the Accord of Two Fangs. It guaranteed rights for both predator and prey species. It established guidelines for integration. And it named humans as permanent mediators and cultural translators. During the signing ceremony, Kresh stood beside Taehyun as co-ambassador. The first Vrakith to ever hold such a position, the first predator species to be. 5 years had passed since that first meeting in the corridor. Taehyun stood at the window of his quarters on Nexus Prime and looked out at the transformed station. Ships from dozens of species came and went. The docking areas that once held only prey species now welcomed everyone. Vrakith Nethrik, and 3 other predator species that had emerged from isolation, walked freely alongside prey species that had learned to overcome their fear. Children from many worlds attended integrated schools. Young Vrakith played with human kids. Nethrik younglings joined sports teams with bird-like Sylvari and others. A whole generation was growing up seeing diversity as normal. Taehyun was older now, with some gray in his hair. He had accomplished more than he ever imagined possible. But he was tired. It was time to pass the torch to younger, more energetic people. He had announced his retirement 3 months ago. Today was his last official day. There would be a ceremony, speeches, probably some crying. Taehyun was not good with big emotional events, but he would endure it for all the people who wanted to say goodbye. A message came through on his communicator. It was from Kresh, who was returning from a diplomatic mission to the Nethrik homeworld. The young Vrakith ambassador had been gone for 2 months. The message was simple. I will be there for your ceremony. Would not miss it for anything. Taehyun smiled. Kresh was fully grown now, a massive and impressive Vrakith. But to Taehyun, Kresh would always be that curious cub who had nipped his hand in mischief. The ceremony took place in the main assembly hall. It was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Captain Jiwoo, now an admiral, gave a speech about Taehyun's contributions. Dr. Hana presented her latest research, showing how human Vrakith bonds had become a model for interspecies cooperation everywhere. Lieutenant Subin, now a commander, spoke about how Taehyun had taught everyone that courage came in many forms, not just in battle but in kindness, patience, and choosing to see the person behind the fear. Ambassador Quellen gave a speech that made many in the audience weep. The elderly Sylvari spoke about overcoming a lifetime of instinctive terror, about learning to trust, about how one human's simple act of gentleness had changed everything. Then the High Matriarch stood. She was very old now, her silver scales fading to white, but her voice was still strong. Taehyun of the humans, she said formally. You gave my people something we thought we had lost forever. Hope. You saw my grandchild not as a monster but as a person. That simple recognition started a transformation that has spread across the galaxy. She approached him and placed a crystal pendant around his neck. It glowed with that same golden color. By the ancient laws of my people, I name you packmate. You are family to all Vrakith now and forever. Your name is in our songs. Your story will be told to our children until the stars grow cold. Taehyun bowed deeply, unable to speak through his emotion. Finally, Kresh came forward. The massive Vrakith moved with grace and power, but when Kresh looked at Taehyun, those eyes were still the same golden color they had turned 5 years ago. I learned everything from you, Kresh said, voice deep but gentle. You taught me that the strongest thing we can do is choose kindness, that real courage is reaching across fear to find friendship, that monsters are just people we have not understood yet. Kresh lowered that great head, pressing forehead to Taehyun's palm just like that first day. And I from you, Taehyun replied, his voice breaking. You taught me that trust is a gift, that young beings of any species are full of curiosity and hope, that we are all just looking for connections. The assembly erupted in applause that lasted for many minutes. Beings of every type were on their feet, celebrating not just Taehyun but what he represented, the proof that bridges could be built, that fear could become friendship. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Taehyun spent hours talking with friends old and new. Everywhere he looked, he saw species mixing that would never have interacted 5 years ago. He saw predator and prey sharing food and laughter. He saw children of different worlds playing together without a second thought about who was dangerous and who was not. As the evening wore on, Taehyun slipped away quietly. He needed a moment alone. He went to that corridor where it had all started. the place where a curious young Vrakith had nipped his hand. There was a plaque on the wall now. It told the story in 17 different languages, using scripts from across the galaxy. Here, gentleness proved stronger than fear. Here, a hand extended in friendship changed the stars. Taehyun touched the plaque and remembered that moment of choice, to stay calm, to respond with curiosity instead of fear. He had not known it would lead to all of this. He had just seen a young creature who wanted to play. Soft footsteps made him turn. Kresh had followed him. "I thought you might come here," Kresh said. They stood together in the corridor looking at the plaque. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd pulled away?" Taehyun asked. Kresh made a thoughtful rumble. "I think someone else would have eventually done something similar. Maybe not as soon, maybe not as well. But kindness finds a way. The galaxy was ready for change. You were just brave enough to be the first to show it was possible." They walked back toward the celebration together, the massive Vrakith matching pace with the aging human. "What will you do now?" Kresh asked. "Where will you go?" "Home," Taehyun said. "Back to Earth. Back to my grandmother's farm. I want to work with my hands again. Fix tractors instead of diplomatic crises. Grow vegetables. Maybe get a dog," he smiled at Kresh. "But you must promise to visit." "There is plenty of room. The neighbors will be shocked when a Vrakith ambassador shows up at a small farm. It will be fun." Kresh's eyes glowed bright gold. "I promise. You are my family. Distance does not change that." The years passed. Taehyun lived quietly on Earth, working his grandmother's old farm. But he was never alone. Kresh visited often, along with other Vrakith friends. Human children from nearby towns would come to meet the amazing alien ambassador. Taehyun would tell them stories about friendship and courage and choosing to see past fear. The galaxy continued to change. More predator species came out of isolation. More prey species learned to overcome their instincts. New alliances formed. Trade flourished. Art and culture mixed in beautiful new ways. Schools across hundreds of worlds taught about the moment in the corridor. About Taehyun and Kresh. About how one simple act of kindness had rippled outward to transform everything. When Taehyun was very old, lying in a bed surrounded by family, both human and Vrakith, Kresh came one last time. The great Vrakith ambassador, now high matriarch of the Vrakith people, sat beside the human who had changed everything. "Thank you," Kresh said softly, golden eyes dim with tears, "for seeing me, for not pulling away, for showing me that I could be more than what others feared." Taehyun smiled, his hand resting on Kresh's large paw. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me that trust is the greatest gift, for being my friend." Taehyun passed peacefully, surrounded by love. His funeral was attended by thousands. Representatives from every species in the galaxy came to pay respects. The Vrakith sang their mourning songs. The humans shared their memories. The Nethrik performed their honor dance. Ambassador Quellen, very old now, gave the final eulogy. He taught us that empathy is not weakness. That curiosity is courage. That family is not defined by species but by choice. He showed us that the distance between monster and friend is only as far as we choose to make it. Kresh added Taehyun's name to the eternal Vrakith songs, where it would live forever in their collective memory. Back on Nexus Prime, in that corridor where it all began, a new generation of children played. A young human girl chased a Vrakith cub. They were laughing in their different languages but understanding each other perfectly. The cub playfully nipped at the girl's hand. The girl giggled and petted the cub's spines. Neither felt any fear. For them, this was simply how friends played. Above them, the golden plaque still shone. Teachers brought their students to see it. Parents told their children the story. Historians studied what had happened here and how it had changed the galaxy. But the most important legacy was not in plaques or history books. It was in these children playing together without knowing that this was once thought impossible. It was in the galaxy they would inherit, where species helped each other instead of fearing each other. It was in the simple truth that Taehyun and Kresh had proven together, that gentleness is strength, that choosing kindness is courage, that every being, no matter how they look or where they come from, deserves to be seen as a person. The young Vrakith cub looked up at the plaque with curious golden eyes. The human girl read the inscription aloud, slowly sounding out the words. "What does it mean?" the cub asked. The girl thought for a moment, then smiled. "It means we can be friends." "Anyone can be friends if they try," the cub purred happily. Then let us keep being friends. They ran off together, two children from different worlds, playing in a corridor that had once witnessed the impossible. And above them, the stars continued to shine on a galaxy that had learned to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and friendship over everything else. All because one human did not pull away. All because one Vrakith cub chose to bow. All because they both recognized in that moment that they had found family. Formally recognized as equal partners in galactic governance, the High Matriarch addressed the assembly. Her voice carried across the chamber and was broadcast to thousands of worlds. We were taught to be alone. We believed the galaxy would never accept us. Then the humans showed us a different truth. They showed us that we could choose family, that fear and love are both choices, that bridges can be built one friendship at a time. She looked at Taehyun and Kresh. These two, human and Vrakith, have shown us the way forward, not through grand speeches or political maneuvering, but through simple, honest friendship. Through seeing each other as people, not categories. The chamber erupted in applause. Species that had never worked together before were standing side by side, celebrating a new beginning. Ambassador Quellen approached Taehyun after the ceremony. The bird-like alien had tears in their eyes. I was terrified of the Vrakith when they first arrived. Every instinct told me to flee, but I stayed. I watched you with Kresh. I learned that my fear was my choice to overcome. Quellen looked over at where Kresh was talking with the Nethric delegation. Now I count several Vrakith as friends. My children play with Vrakith cubs. I never thought this would be possible. Thank you for showing us it could be. Taehyun shook his head. You showed yourself it was possible. You chose courage. That was all you. As the celebration continued, Taehyun realized that the work was becoming something bigger than him. Kresh and other young people from many species were taking up the mission. They were building friendships that crossed every boundary. The galaxy was transforming one relationship at a time, and it had all started with a simple choice to see someone as a person, not a monster.